It was nearly dark when my phone buzzed. One new notification. Voice memo from Dad. I almost ignored it. He never sent recordings. Just short calls, clipped texts. The kind that ended before they ever said much. But something about that title made me stop. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I had been slicing a lemon for tea, the knife still on the board. The late afternoon light was slipping away, leaving the room dipped in blue. I wiped my hands on the towel and pressed play. At first, there was nothing unusual. The shuffle of movement, a faint laugh, the clink of glass. Then his voice came through, low, familiar. The kind of tone he used when talking business or making small promises he didn't mean to keep. I smiled without meaning to, waiting for something ordinary. Maybe he had recorded a reminder for me. Maybe it was a test message. Then another voice entered, lighter, sharper. Elaine, my stepmom. They were laughing. The sound was warm, intimate, like two people completely at ease with each other. For a second, I almost smiled again. Then something inside me tightened. The laughter didn't fit the way I remembered them. It was too private, too knowing. I frowned, turned up the volume, and listened harder. Dad said something I couldn't catch. The words blurred under the noise of a TV somewhere in the background. Then Elaine's voice again, soft and amused. I couldn't make out every word, but I caught enough to know my name had come up. The sound of it said so casually sent a chill through me. I replayed that part again, leaning closer. There it was. My name. Then more laughter. Then something that sounded like paper being moved. The whole thing lasted less than a minute, but by the time it ended, my skin was prickling. I hit play again, turning the volume all the way up. The second time I caught the shape of a sentence. He said she'll, and then something muffled. I replayed that fragment again, over and over, trying to catch what came next. My hands were still on the counter. Outside, a car door slammed and I jumped. I pressed play one more time, this time holding the phone close to my ear, like the answer would come if I just leaned in far enough, and then I heard it clearly. She'll sign it if we make it sound like family. On Christmas. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. I stared at the phone as if it had betrayed me. I replayed it again, and there it was, word for word. His voice steady, hers agreeing, then laughter. Easy, familiar, cruel. I didn't breathe. The room changed shape around me. The air thickened. The smell of lemon turned sharp, almost metallic. My hands started to shake. I walked to the sink, set the phone down, and gripped the counter until my fingers ached. That sentence kept looping in my head. She'll sign it if we make it sound like family. They had been planning this. Planning for me. I sat down on the couch, pressed play again, and forced myself to listen from the start. The clinking glasses, the laughter, Elaine's voice, my dad's calm certainty. It wasn't just a stray comment. It was a conversation. A plan dressed in domestic ease. The same kind of ease they'd used every time they tried to make me agree to something I didn't fully understand. My mind went back to last spring, to the conversation about repairs for the old house, Mom's house. The one she left to me before she died. They had wanted me to co-sign a loan for roof work. Elaine had said it was just a formality to keep the house in the family. I'd refused, but Dad hadn't seemed angry, just disappointed like I'd ruined something nice. I hadn't thought about it since, until now. I walked back to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and searched my emails. The thread popped up right away. Subject line, home maintenance estimate. Attached was a document with both their signatures, and a blank line waiting for mine. My mom's address printed at the top like a ghost. The realization settled cold in my stomach. They hadn't given up when I said no. They'd just waited for the right moment. Christmas, family, sentiment. They knew I'd drop my guard when the word family came wrapped in tinsel. I copied the voice memo from my phone and saved it to the computer. The little progress bar crawled across the screen, slow and merciless. When it finished, I renamed the file. Family Truth. Then I sent it to myself, to my cloud, to a USB drive, to every safe place I could think of. My fingers moved fast, automatic. When it was done, I sat back and stared at the blinking cursor on the screen. Every pulse of light felt like a heartbeat, echoing the end of something I hadn't realized was dying. The sun is gone now. The apartment glowed soft and dim under the kitchen light. I made tea and carried it to the window. Outside, the first snow of winter had started to fall. Slow flakes against the dark glass, catching the light from the street below. I held the cup between my palms, feeling the heat seep into my skin. The steam rose in thin curls, blurring the city lights. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Dad, subject line, Christmas dinner. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I could already picture the words. Something warm, something inviting, something that would sound like love if I didn't already know what sat behind it. I set the phone face down on the table and let the quiet fill the room. The kettle still hissed softly in the background. The snow kept falling. I thought about the house, about Mom, about all the times I had chosen peace instead of confrontation. This time, peace would look different. It would look like silence, like evidence, like control. When the tea cooled, I saved the file one last time and closed the screen. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window. I didn't look afraid anymore. Outside, the city shimmered under the snow. Inside, the air felt clean, cold, and still. My heartbeat slowed, steady and certain, marking the start of something I could finally name. Last Christmas, my mom and I smelled like cinnamon and pine. She wore a red sweater that matched the ornaments she hung one by one while humming an old song from the radio. I remember standing on a stool, passing her the gold hooks for each ornament, pretending I was helping. She smiled at everything, even when the lights tangled. That night we baked cookies and stayed up past midnight just talking. I didn't know then that it would be the last time we'd sit together like that. A year later, she was gone, and the sound of Christmas music turned into something I couldn't stand to hear. After the funeral, the house stayed quiet for months. My dad walked around like a ghost, half in the world, half somewhere else. I tried to keep things normal, watering Mom's plants, dusting her books, keeping her kitchen as she left it. But grief has its own way of erasing people. One afternoon, I came home and found boxes stacked in the hallway. Elaine was there, her hair perfect, her voice soft. She said Dad couldn't handle all the memories and that she was just helping him clear the space. I remember the box in her hands had Mom's Christmas ornaments. I took it from her and said I'd handle it. She smiled too easily, like she had already won some silent argument. 8 months later, they got married in a courthouse. No family, no ceremony, just an email with a picture of them smiling outside the building. I sat at my kitchen table staring at it, Elaine in cream, Dad in a gray suit, both looking comfortable in a way that made me feel like an outsider in my own family. When I finally called to congratulate them, Elaine answered. She sounded sweet, practiced, polished. She said we'd have Christmas together that year, a real family celebration. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. The first Christmas with her as my stepmom felt like stepping into a stranger's home. The house looked the same from the outside, but inside, everything had changed. The framed photo of Mom and me was gone from the mantel. The smell of cinnamon had been replaced by something sharp and floral. Elaine moved through the rooms like she'd always belonged there. She hugged me at the door, called me honey, and introduced me to her friends as her daughter. I smiled for Dad's sake, but my chest felt tight the entire evening. That night, after everyone left, I walked into the living room. The tree was still glowing. I found the ornament with my mom's name painted in gold. It was hanging near the back, hidden behind a branch. I moved it to the front. When I turned around, Elaine was watching me. She didn't say anything, just looked a faint smile on her face. It was the first time I saw what she really was. For the next few years, I kept my distance. Holidays, birthdays, dinners that started as invitations and ended in obligations. Dad would call and ask me to come by. He'd say Elaine wanted to make peace, that she was trying. Every time I went, something from Mom's would be missing. Her chair, her china set, the painting she loved. When I asked, Elaine always said it was in storage. I stopped asking. Last spring, Dad called about house repairs. He said the roof needed replacing and it would be easier if my name was added to the paperwork. Just a formality since it was still technically Mom's property. I told him I needed to think about it. A week later, Elaine emailed me the forms with little heart emojis in her signature line. I never signed them. Now, after hearing that voice memo, I knew exactly why she'd been in such a hurry. The night after I listened to it, I drove by their house. I told myself I just wanted to see the place to make sure nothing had changed. The windows glowed warm against the cold. A Christmas wreath hung on the door. For a moment, I almost went up and knocked, just to see if they'd look me in the eye. But I stayed in the car watching silhouettes move behind the curtains. It hit me then that I wasn't part of that house anymore. Maybe I never had been. I thought about Mom, about how she'd tried to teach me kindness without letting people step over me. She used to say being kind doesn't mean being blind. I whispered that to myself in the car. Kind, not blind. I started the engine and drove home. Back in my apartment, I pulled out the old photo box from under my bed. There were pictures of me and Mom baking, laughing, a few with Dad smiling beside us. In one of them, he had his arm around both of us, eyes soft real. I wondered when that version of him disappeared. Grief changes people, but greed reveals them. I spread the photos on the floor and picked one to keep on my desk. It was from that last Christmas, the one with the red sweater and the crooked star on the tree. I placed it in a small frame and sat there until the room went dark. Later, while washing my cup, my phone buzzed with another notification. An email from Elaine. The subject line read, "Family Plans." My stomach turned. I opened it. She wrote that she and Dad wanted to host Christmas again this year, that it was time to let the past go. She mentioned family business and togetherness, words that sounded suddenly sharp. I stared at the screen, every nerve in me alive. Then I saw the name copied at the bottom of the email. Richard C., estate advisor. I felt something cold run through me. Richard C., that name again. I remembered the papers he'd drawn up last year, the ones about co-ownership. The timing, the wording, the fake warmth of the message all lined up. It wasn't an invitation, it was a setup. I sat back holding the phone, letting the reality settle. They were planning to use Christmas again, just like the memo said. Family as a disguise. The same trick wrapped in holiday ribbons. I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark. Outside the city hummed quietly, cars passing, wind brushing against the window. Inside, something shifted in me. The part that had once wanted their approval was gone. What replaced it was calm, cold clarity. I whispered to the empty room that I wasn't going to let them do it. Not this time. I saved the email to my evidence folder and watched the small progress bar crawl across the screen. Then I poured myself another glass of water and leaned against the counter. The reflection of my face in the window looked tired but stronger. When I finally went to bed, I left the phone charging beside me. The voice memo still saved, the email still open. Outside wind pushed against the glass like distant waves. Somewhere out there, Dad and Elaine were planning a Christmas I would never attend, and for the first time I was perfectly fine with that. The subject line read, Christmas dinner invitation. It showed up just after midnight, the kind of hour when most honest messages stay unsent. I was half asleep when the ping broke the quiet. I reached for my phone, thinking it might be work or a late order from a client. Instead, it was from Elaine. Her name sat there in neat blue letters, the same calm, polite tone that had fooled me too many times. I opened the email. Every word dripped sugar. We'd love to have you this year. Dad misses you. Let's make this Christmas feel like family again. My stomach tightened as I read it. She even added a smiley face after the word family. I scrolled down, noticing the list of copied addresses. One stood out like a stain on white paper. Richard C., estate advisor. The name hit me hard enough that I read it twice to make sure. I could feel my pulse in my hands. I knew that name. He was the same man who had handled the paperwork last year. The one for joint ownership, the one I never signed. I set the phone on the counter and walked to the window. Outside, the city lights flickered through thin snow. Somewhere far below, a car alarm echoed, then stopped. I felt the familiar weight in my chest that came with anything connected to my dad's house. It wasn't nostalgia anymore, it was a warning. I went back to the email and read it again slowly. The phrasing was almost identical to the message from the year before. Same warmth, same guilt dressed as kindness. I clicked reply and typed a few words, then erased them. I tried again, deleted it again. Nothing sounded right. Every sentence made me sound either too angry or too polite. I ended up closing the draft altogether. Instead, I opened my saved folder labeled Family. Inside were old emails, forms, copies of that loan request, and the voice memo file. I renamed it Family Truth and moved it to the top. For a moment, I sat there in the half-dark, the glow of the screen washing over my hands. Then I did something I hadn't done in a while. I called my dad. It rang 4 times before he answered. His voice sounded tired but cheerful, like he had been rehearsing. He said, "Hey kiddo, you got the email?" I kept my voice calm. I did. I noticed Richard's name on it. Why is he copied? There was a pause, then a small laugh. Oh, that he said just routine. He helps with a few estate details, nothing big. Just paperwork to keep things smooth. The word paperwork hit like a bruise. I asked if we could talk in person before Christmas. He hesitated, then said, "Of course, but Elaine already planned everything. You'll come, right? It's time we all move forward." I hung up before I answered. The next morning, the world outside was pale and quiet, the kind of winter light that made everything look washed clean. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, replaying the call in my head. I couldn't tell if my dad believed his own excuses or if he'd stopped caring, whether I did. I spent most of that day digging through old folders, emails, contracts, even Mom's old mortgage documents. The more I read, the clearer it became. Richard C. wasn't just an advisor. He'd handled the legal side of the property transfer after Mom's death. My dad's name was added to the deed then, not because Mom planned it, but because Elaine had convinced him it was practical. I found the scanned copy and ran my finger down the signatures. Mine was missing exactly where the new paperwork had left a blank line. I leaned back, my chair creaking, and closed my eyes. The pieces fit too neatly. The memo wasn't a slip of words anymore. It was a script, Christmas family signature. They were repeating the same pattern. Only this time I had proof. That evening, as snow began to thicken outside, I went for a walk. The cold hit my face sharp and real, a good reminder that I was still here, still in control of my choices. The sidewalks glistened under streetlights, and somewhere nearby, someone played a Christmas song from a radio. I walked past a store window filled with ornaments the same kind my mom loved. I stopped and looked at them. For the first time, I didn't feel the usual ache. I felt steady. Back home, I sat at my desk and printed the email. The sound of the printer clicking was almost comforting. I stapled it to a copy of the voice memo transcript. My little folder of truth was growing thicker by the day. I placed it in a box with the title Legal. Later, my phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from Elaine. "Just checking in. Hope you're coming. Dad's looking forward to it." She added a heart at the end. I didn't respond. I watched the message fade into the screen and locked my phone. I made soup, turned on the small radio in my kitchen, and tried to let normal life take up space again. But even the sound of water boiling reminded me of her voice. Elaine always filled silence with something sweet that turned sour after you swallowed it. When the mail arrived the next day, there was a thick envelope from the family attorney. I opened it carefully. Inside was a printed invitation on expensive cardstock. Gold lettering, cursive script. Christmas dinner, it said, hosted by Mr. and Mrs. Morgan. Beneath that was a smaller note written in Dad's handwriting. "Looking forward to making things official this year. Love, Dad." My chest went cold. Official. The word pulsed in my head. I tore the note in half and threw it into the trash. Then I picked up my phone and took a picture of the invitation, adding it to the growing gallery of evidence. I spent the rest of the day pacing my apartment, going over options. I could confront them, expose them, warn relatives, but that would give them time to twist the story. Elaine had a gift for playing victim. I could already hear her voice trembling over the phone. She'd say I misunderstood, that she was just trying to help. And Dad would go along too worn down or too weak to fight her. By evening, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to show up. Not to their dinner, not to their house. I would stay quiet, wait, and gather more, but I wouldn't play their game anymore. Before bed, I sat at my laptop and wrote one short email draft. Subject line for future reference. It contained a single sentence. "I am aware of your intentions. Please handle all matters through legal channels." I haven't sent it yet. I wanted to hold that small piece of control for myself. When I turned off the lights, the room felt peaceful in a strange way. Like the air itself had stopped pretending. I lay in bed, eyes open, watching the faint glow from the street stretch across the ceiling. The words from the memo returned to me steady and poisonous. "She'll sign it if we make it sound like family on Christmas." But this time, instead of fear, I felt something else, resolve. I closed my eyes, knowing I had crossed a quiet line inside myself. There would be no signature, no dinner. And soon there would be no pretending left between us. The snow had barely melted when I decided to see Maya. She had been my friend since college, the kind of person who could smell trouble before it had a name. I texted her that morning and she called right away. Her voice sounded like caffeine and calm confidence. She told me to come to her office downtown. "Bring whatever you have," she said. All of it. By noon, I was standing in the glass lobby of her law firm, clutching a folder thick with printed emails, screenshots, and a small USB drive. The air smelled like toner and expensive coffee. A receptionist led me to Maya's office. She was sitting behind her desk, reading something on her screen, her glasses sliding down her nose. When she looked up and saw me, her expression softened. I hadn't realized until that moment how much tension I'd been carrying in my shoulders. She stood and hugged me briefly, the kind of hug that was more grounding than comforting. Then she gestured to the chair across from her. "Tell me everything," she said. I sat down and took a deep breath. I told her about the voice memo, about the email invitation, about Richard C. showing up in the CC line like a stain that wouldn't wash out. I told her about the way Dad's voice had sounded in that recording, calm and sure, and how it made me question every memory of him I had left. Maya listened without interrupting. She didn't take notes. She just watched me, her face still, but her eyes sharp. When I finished, she asked to hear the memo. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the file, and pressed play. The sound filled the quiet room, Dad's voice, Elaine's laughter, that line, "She'll sign it if we make it sound like family." When it ended, Maya leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. "That's not just a bad conversation," she said finally. "That's the intent." I frowned. Intent for what? She looked at me carefully. Fraud, coercion, undue influence, take your pick. They were setting you up to give away property rights without informed consent. The words hit me in waves. Fraud, influence, property rights. They sounded foreign and cold. I stared at the papers in my lap. Maya stood and walked to the window. "You still have your mom's house under your name, right?" I nodded. It's held in trust. She turned back to me, her expression sharpening. Then this is serious. If they had gotten you to sign anything under emotional pressure, it would have been legally binding. I swallowed. So what do I do? She smiled slightly. You document everything. You keep every email, every message. You don't respond to them emotionally. And if they try to corner you on Christmas, you walk away. She paused. Actually, you don't even go? That last part made something inside me unclench. I nodded slowly. Maya sat down again and pulled a legal pad toward her. We're going to make copies of everything she said. Then she handed me a pen. Write down the exact words from that memo, every single one. I wrote as she spoke. My handwriting shook, but I kept going until the whole sentence sat there on the page like a verdict. She read it once, then nodded. I'll have this notarized, just in case. After that, she asked about Richard C. I told her what I knew, which wasn't much. He'd handled legal work for my dad before, and he always showed up when property or money was involved. Maya typed something into her computer and frowned. I know him. He's been reprimanded before for shady estate dealings. She looked up. You're lucky you didn't sign anything. I stared out the window. The city below looked clean, almost too clean. The streets slick with melting snow. People walked fast, holding coffee cups and shopping bags, living lives untouched by betrayal. Maya's voice brought me back. I'm going to draft a letter. It will state that all property communications must go through me from now on. No direct contact. That way, if they try to manipulate you, it's documented. I nodded again, grateful and tired. She reached across the desk and touched my hand. Claire, she said softly, don't let guilt make your decisions. You're not being cruel by protecting yourself. Her words landed deep. For years, I had measured every action against whether it would hurt someone else. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd given away trying to stay kind. We spent another hour going through documents. She scanned files, made notes, organized evidence into folders labeled legal, personal, and emotional, though she smiled at the last one and said it was mostly for me. When we finished, she handed me a copy of everything and said, keep this somewhere safe. I stood to leave, but she stopped me. One more thing. If they invite you to dinner, decline in writing. Something neutral, no anger, let them reveal themselves. Outside, the afternoon light was fading again. The sidewalks were slick and people hurried past in coats and scarves. I walked to my car slowly, the folder pressed against my chest like a shield. The city lights flickered one by one, soft and gold. At home, I made coffee and sat at the table. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the heater. I opened my laptop and saw a new email from Elaine. Just checking in, it read. Hope you can make it this year. It wouldn't be the same without you. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, I already have plans. Wishing you both a peaceful holiday. I hit send and sat back feeling the smallest spark of relief. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was resistance. Later that evening, I received a text from Dad. It said simply, you don't have to be dramatic. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Maya was right. Silence would say more than anything I could write. I went to the window and watched the snow start again, soft and slow under the streetlights, somewhere out there. My dad and Elaine were probably planning their version of Christmas, their version of family, and maybe they thought I'd still come. But I had already chosen something better. Boundaries. I closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and let the quiet settle in. For the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The week before Christmas moved like slow water, quiet but heavy. The air outside stayed cold enough to bite, yet inside my apartment, the heater hummed steadily, filling the rooms with that faint scent of metal and dust. I tried to keep my mind on work, on the small designs I'd promised clients before the holidays, but focus came in short bursts. Every few hours, I'd catch myself staring at nothing, the same sentence from that voice memo drifting back like a ghost. She'll sign it if we make it sound like family. Each time I heard it in my head, the word family hit harder, like an echo that wouldn't fade. That Sunday morning, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to spend Christmas replaying betrayal. I was going to create peace where their noise couldn't reach me. I pulled out a small box of decorations I'd ignored for years. Inside were a few ornaments I had kept from Mom's house, the ones that had somehow escaped Elaine's careful clearing of history. My favorite was a small wooden star, painted silver and chipped at the edges. I hung it on the plant by the window because I didn't own a tree. The sight of it made me smile anyway. I spent the rest of the day cooking for myself. Nothing fancy, just soup and bread, the kind of food that felt safe. Music played low on the radio. Outside flakes of snow started to fall again. Every so often I'd glance at my phone, half expecting another message, but it stayed silent. It was strange how peace could feel suspicious when you weren't used to it. In the evening, I lit a candle and sat on the couch with my tea. The light flickered against the walls, soft and steady. I thought of Mom. Her presence still lived in the small, ordinary moments. The way she used to hum while cooking, the gentle way she'd scold me for letting tea steep too long. I could almost hear her voice telling me to breathe, to stay kind but firm. I whispered it out loud. Kind, not blind. The words steadied me. When I checked my phone later, I saw a new voicemail. The name on the screen made my stomach turn. Dad. I hesitated before pressing play. His voice came through calm but strained. He said Elaine felt terrible about the misunderstanding. He said they wanted me there for Christmas, that it was time to let the past go. He mentioned the word family again like a magic spell he thought still worked. I listened once, then saved the message to my evidence folder without replying. That night, sleep came in pieces. I dreamed of Mom's house, of the garden she used to tend behind it, wild roses and overgrown grass. In the dream, she was standing by the fence, smiling but silent. When I woke, my pillow was damp. The light outside was soft and blue. I lay there for a while, letting the quiet morning sink in before getting up. The next day, I decided to get out of the apartment. I drove to the market, bundled in layers and gloves, just to feel surrounded by people who didn't know my story. The smell of cinnamon and roasted nuts filled the air. Children tugged on their parents' coats, laughing at displays of candy canes and snow globes. It felt almost normal. I bought a few things for myself, a small wreath, fresh bread, a candle that smelled like pine. Normal things for a life that finally belonged to me again. When I got back home, I hung the wreath on my door. The green against the dark wood looked simple, clean mine. Then I made another pot of soup called Maya. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was its usual calm rhythm. She asked how I was doing, if anything new had happened. I told her about the voicemail. She said to save everything and keep quiet. Let them show their hand first. I told her I planned to stay home for Christmas, no visits, no drama. She approved. Silence is a form of power, she said. Let them feel the absence of your yes. After the call, I opened the window a crack. Cold air rushed in, carrying that sharp scent of snow. I wrapped myself in a blanket and watched the sky turn a muted pink as evening came. It reminded me that time moves forward whether we're ready or not. Later that night, I wrote in my journal. I wrote about how betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers and waits for you to agree. I wrote about how peace isn't a gift others give you, but a boundary you draw yourself. Then I closed the book, feeling lighter. The next morning, Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Dad. The text was short. We're setting the table for 6. Hope you change your mind. I stared at it for a long moment, then put the phone face down. A minute later, I turned it back over and typed a single word. Declined. Then I hit send. The silence that followed felt like air after a storm. I stood by the window watching snow drift down in lazy spirals. Somewhere in the distance, carolers were singing. Their voices sounded faint, almost unreal. I thought of all the Christmases before, all the pretending, the politeness, the small talk that covered cracks. There would be none of that this year. This year I was reclaiming quiet. That afternoon I pulled out Mom's old recipe book. The pages were yellowed and stained with oil and sugar. I found her note beside one of the cookie recipes. It said simply, for when you need comfort. I baked them slowly, letting the smell fill the kitchen. When they were done, I poured a glass of milk and sat at the table, tasting the memory of her warmth. As night fell, the world outside turned silver under the moonlight. The city was hushed, like it was holding its breath. I took out the file from Maya's office, flipped through the documents one last time, and then closed it. Everything that needed to be done was already in motion. I didn't have to fight anymore. I just had to wait. I went to bed early, the kind of tired that felt clean. My last thought before sleep was of Mom's voice saying she was proud of me, though I knew it was only my memory filling the quiet. When morning came, the first light touched the edge of my curtains. I opened my eyes and felt something new. The day didn't feel heavy anymore. The house smelled of pine and cookies. Outside, children were laughing in the snow. My phone sat silent on the nightstand. I didn't need to check it. For once, silence wasn't emptiness. It was peaceful. The morning of Christmas Eve started with sunlight cutting through the blinds, sharp and golden against the quiet. I woke to it spreading across the floor, softening as it reached the small tree by the window. For a long time, I just lay there listening to the city outside, the sound of tires crunching snow, a dog barking somewhere down the street, the hum of normal life that had nothing to do with mine. The air smelled faintly of pine and coffee. I felt calm, almost weightless, as if the last few days had washed something out of me. I made breakfast and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. The clock on the screen blinked 9:30. In my inbox, the invitation from Elaine still sat unread. I hovered the cursor over it for a second before deleting it. A small act, simple but final. I closed the laptop and took a sip of coffee, savoring the quiet that followed. By noon, the world outside was all white. Snow had started again, heavier this time, coating everything in a soft blur. I put on a sweater and walked to the window. Across the street, a couple was carrying bags of gifts, laughing as they tried not to slip on the ice. I watched them until they disappeared around the corner, a small reminder that not every family gathering was built on lies. My phone buzzed on the counter. The sound sliced through the calm. I didn't move at first. Then I walked over and saw his name. Dad. My chest tightened, but my hands stayed steady. The text was short. "We're waiting. Please don't ruin Christmas." I stared at it until the words lost meaning. Then another message came through right after. "Elaine says there's still time to talk things through. Let's fix this." I let out a breath, slow and controlled. Then I typed a single sentence. "I heard everything." My thumb hovered for a second before I pressed send. The message left in an instant, a small blue bubble floating into silence. I set the phone down face down and walked to the window again. Outside, snowflakes spun like ash in the air. The weight in my chest lifted a little, replaced by something still and clean. A few minutes later, the phone rang. His name again. I didn't answer. It rang once, twice, then stopped. A voicemail followed. I didn't listen. I couldn't yet. I stood there for a long time, hands tucked into the sleeves of my sweater, the sound of my heartbeat louder than anything else in the room. Eventually, I turned on some music, low and slow, just enough to fill the space. I made tea, the steam rising in small curls, and sat down by the window. My reflection in the glass looked different. Older maybe, but also stronger. I realized I wasn't shaking anymore. The afternoon stretched quietly. I read for a while, flipped through an old cookbook of Mom's that still smelled faintly like her perfume, and lit the candle I'd saved for Christmas. The scent of cinnamon filled the room. It was exactly what I needed. Just after 3, another call came through. I turned the phone over and let it ring. Then the screen went dark again. A new message appeared almost immediately, from Dad. It said, "You can't just walk away from your family." I whispered under my breath, "Yes, I can." The rest of the day passed slowly. I cooked dinner, simple food, something warm that filled the apartment with the smell of herbs and butter. I poured a glass of wine and set it on the table beside my plate. For once I ate without guilt or company. Just the sound of this heater humming and snow tapping lightly at the windows. When I finished, I washed the dishes and wiped the counters. My phone blinked again, another voicemail, but I ignored it. The quiet between us had become its own kind of answer. I sat down with my journal. My pen moved before I had words planned. I wrote about endings, about how sometimes they don't look dramatic at all. Sometimes they look like a single text message sent at the right moment. I wrote that peace can come disguised as distance, and that silence is just another way of saying I'm done. The evening darkened early. Streetlights flickered on, casting halos over the snow. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed, then the sound faded. I turned off all the lights except the one on my small tree. It glowed faintly against the window, reflected in the glass like a quiet heartbeat. For a while, I sat there replaying everything in my head. The memo, the emails, the laughter I'd heard that first night. It didn't sting anymore. It felt like a memory that had run its course. The anger had burned away, leaving only clarity. Around 7, my phone lit up again. A new message. This one was shorter. "Why are you doing this?" I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it without replying. I didn't need to explain the choice to anyone. Not anymore. Outside, the snow had slowed to a gentle fall. I opened the window a crack, letting in the cold air. It touched my skin like a reminder that I was still here, still whole. I walked to the bookshelf and took down one of Mom's old books. The spine faded from years of sunlight. Inside the cover, she had written something in her neat handwriting. "Choose peace even when they call it defiance." I ran my finger over the words. It felt like she was still guiding me. The phone buzzed once more, this time with an email notification. "My name in the subject line. From Dad." I didn't open it. I dragged it straight into the folder marked Evidence. Then I closed the laptop and turned away from the screen. I sat down by the fire, the faint crackle of the candle filling the quiet. My hands rested in my lap, steady and warm. The city outside seemed far away now, muffled by snow and distance. When I finally stood to turn off the lights, I caught my reflection again in the window. There was something new in it. Not triumph, not revenge, just calm. The kind that comes when you stop defending what should never have been questioned in the first place. I walked to the bedroom, the soft floor cool under my feet. Before turning off the lamp, I looked at my phone one last time. No new messages, just the silence I had asked for. I set it down, pulled the blanket over myself, and let my eyes close. Somewhere in the city, they were probably sitting at that dinner table, wondering why I hadn't shown up. Maybe Elaine was whispering that I'd changed. Maybe Dad was still pretending not to understand why. It didn't matter anymore. I had changed. And for the first time, it felt like survival. The morning of Christmas Day was quiet in the kind of way that felt staged. My phone hadn't buzzed once. No calls, no texts. Not even from the automated grocery app that usually reminded me about milk. The silence had a texture to it, almost heavy. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and the cursor blinking in an empty email window. The subject line was already typed. Transparency is a gift. I stared at it for a long time, sipping coffee that had gone cold. The words felt strange in my mouth, but right in my gut. This was the moment I'd been building toward since the night I heard that voice memo. I opened the folder marked Evidence. Inside sat the audio file, the transcript, the invitation, and copies of every message I had ignored. My reflection looked pale on the laptop screen. Outside, snow was falling steady and soundless. It was Christmas morning, and the world looked innocent. I started typing. My hands didn't shake, not even once. I wrote that I had heard their conversation, that I wouldn't attend the dinner, and that any property matters concerning Mom's house needed to go through legal channels from now on. I thanked them for understanding. Then I added one last line, Merry Christmas. I attached the audio file and transcript, triple-checked the recipients, and hit send. The sound of the sent notification popped like a cork breaking the quiet. For a second, I just sat there feeling the weight leave my shoulders. Then I heard the small ding of a red receipt. One, then another. First Dad, then Elaine. I imagined them sitting side by side at that long oak table, phones lighting up with my name. I wondered which of them would open it first. 10 minutes later, another sound. A new email. The sender line read, Elaine Morgan. I clicked it before I could think. Her reply was short. She wasn't supposed to hear that. Fix it before she realizes what the transfer means. My eyes froze on the screen. She had hit reply all. The email had gone to everyone in the group. Dad, my aunt, my uncle, their lawyer, even the estate advisor. The entire family now had a front row seat to her confession. The laugh that came out of me didn't sound like me. It was small, sharp, like air escaping from a balloon. I covered my mouth and leaned back, letting it sink in. I didn't need to expose them. They'd done it themselves. The next ping came from my aunt. A single question mark. Then another email from my uncle asking what was going on. I didn't answer either. I just watched as my inbox filled one notification after another. The sound of those pings became a rhythm like a heartbeat for the truth. I got up and walked to the kitchen window. The snow had started to thicken, coating the parked cars in a soft white layer. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Not triumphant, just steady. The phone rang a few minutes later. Dad's name lit the screen. I let it ring until it stopped. Then it rang again, and again. Finally, I answered. His voice came through rough and rushed. Claire, what did you do? I took a slow breath. I could hear Elaine whispering in the background, frantic, sharp. You shouldn't have sent that, he said. It's Christmas. I said quietly that Christmas wasn't an excuse for deception. He started to speak, then stopped. I could hear him breathing, searching for the right angle. Claire, you misunderstood. That memo wasn't about you. I closed my eyes, listening to the lie fall apart halfway through the sentence. I told him the truth didn't need defending. Then I hung up. I turned the phone face down on the counter and poured another cup of coffee. My hands were still steady. Outside, the snow kept falling, indifferent to the small drama unfolding in our family. Not long after, another email came in from my aunt. She said she had listened to the file and that she couldn't believe what she heard. She wrote that Mom would have been proud of me for standing up for myself. I read it twice. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. The house smelled of coffee and cold air. The radio in the other room played a quiet instrumental of Silent Night. I walked to the living room and turned on the small tree lights. The ornaments glowed softly, their reflections scattered across the window glass. For a moment, I let myself breathe in the peace of it. When my phone vibrated again, it was another email, this time from Elaine. It was a long message full of apology and blame woven together. She said I had misunderstood, that she was only trying to help Dad manage things, that the voice memo was taken out of context. She wrote that the family shouldn't fight over property, and that she hoped I would delete the email before it caused more harm. She ended it with a line that made my stomach twist. We love you and want what's best for you. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the message menu, selected Move to Folder, and dragged it into Evidence. The irony made me smile. I spent the rest of the afternoon reading through the replies that had piled up. Some were supportive, others confused, a few angry. People reveal themselves fast when the truth comes out. I didn't need to respond to any of them. My silence said enough. As the sun dipped behind the buildings, the snow outside turned pink in the fading light. I walked through my apartment, turning off lamps, letting the glow from the tree be the only light left. I sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket and closed my eyes. The quiet hummed around me. My laptop pinged one last time. Another read receipt. Richard C., estate advisor, had opened my email. I could almost imagine him at his desk blinking at the audio file, realizing his name was now part of a trail that couldn't be undone. I closed the laptop and let the darkness settle. Somewhere across the city, my dad and Elaine were probably having the worst Christmas dinner of their lives. The image should have satisfied me, but it didn't. What I felt instead was relief, clean and simple. The kettle started to whistle in the kitchen. I stood, poured hot water into a mug, and leaned against the counter while steam fogged the window. The lights from the building across the street blurred into soft halos. In the distance, someone laughed. A neighbor maybe, or a family opening gifts. I listened for a moment and then turned back to my tea. It was still warm enough to sip. I took a slow drink, tasting the quiet, the finality. The small piece that comes after truth finally lands where it belongs. The fallout started before noon. My phone lit up with messages before I had even finished breakfast. First came my aunt's name, then my cousin's, then numbers I didn't recognize. The family group thread that had been silent for years was suddenly alive. Again, every notification carried a new tone of disbelief. Some asked if it was true. Others wanted to know why I had humiliated my dad and Elaine on Christmas. I didn't answer any of them. The truth had already been spoken. By 10, my aunt called. Her voice came through quickly and shaky. "Claire, what happened?" she asked. I heard something about a recording. I said I'd sent proof of what was really going on, that no one had been forced to believe me. She stayed quiet for a moment. Then she said she'd listened to the file. "I can't unhear that," she whispered. "Your dad sounds like someone I don't recognize." Her voice cracked and I felt something loosen in me. At least one person believed what she heard. By afternoon, the calls turned meaner. My cousin Mark, who had always taken Elaine's side, left a voicemail telling me I'd embarrassed the whole family. He said I should have handled it privately, that airing dirty laundry made everyone look bad. His words didn't sting the way he meant them to. I had stopped worrying about appearances a long time ago. Around 3, Dad's name appeared again. I didn't pick up, but he left a message. He said the email had spread further than it should have. He said Elaine was devastated. He asked if I was proud of myself. The tone wasn't anger. It was guilt in a cheap disguise. He wanted me to feel sorry for the mess they had created. I sat on the couch staring at the phone. The sunlight outside had turned gold, sliding down the walls like honey. The city was quiet, muffled by leftover snow. I thought about deleting his message, but I saved it instead. Evidence wasn't just paperwork anymore. It was the sound of his voice trying to twist the truth back into shape. That evening, I finally checked social media. Someone from the extended family had already hinted about the drama online. A vague post about loyalty, about how some people forget who raised them. The comments were full of sympathy and confusion. It made me laugh, a small, tired sound. People loved the story, but few cared to know the facts. I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. My inbox was still a storm. Some relatives wrote to say they were proud of me. Others said I'd gone too far. The messages blurred into noise after a while. I scrolled until I saw one from a name I didn't expect. It was from Mrs. Conway, my mom's old neighbor. She had known me since I was little. Her note was short. "Good for you, sweetheart. Your mom would have done the same." I sat very still after reading that. My throat tightened. The glass of wine trembled in my hand. For the first time since everything started, I felt something close to peace. Later that night, a knock echoed on my apartment door. My heart jumped. I checked the peephole. It was no one I knew, just a delivery man holding a small envelope. He said it was from a private courier. No sender listed. I signed for it and waited until he left before I opened it. Inside was a single folded letter and a check. The letter was from Elaine. Her handwriting was perfect even now. She wrote that she was sorry things had gotten so ugly, that she wanted to make things right. The check was for a large sum of money, more than I had seen from them in years. She wrote that it was a gesture of goodwill to help me start over. I stared at it for a long time. The check felt like a trap, another trick dressed as kindness. I folded it back into the envelope, sealed it, and dropped it straight into the shred bin under my desk. Then I typed a short note to my lawyer attaching a photo of it. She'd know what to do. By midnight, I was exhausted. The apartment was quiet again, except for the hum of the heater. I poured another half glass of wine and stood by the window. Across the street, someone's Christmas lights blinked unevenly. The colors shifted from red to blue to green, like they couldn't decide what to be. I wondered if Dad and Elaine were sitting in that big house now, pretending everything was fine, still spinning lies to whoever would listen. I thought of Mom again. I pictured her in that old red sweater, laughing as she burned the cookies we made together. She never raised her voice, but when she was disappointed, the silence said enough. I imagined what she'd say to me now. Probably nothing. Just that same quiet pride in her eyes. The kind that said you did the right thing even when it hurt. The next morning, my lawyer Maya called. Her voice sounded both proud and careful. She told me the email trail was solid. She said Elaine's reply all was as close to a written confession as one could get. Maya had already filed a notice with the court to block any ownership transfer attempts. She also recommended I set a boundary through formal documentation. I told her to do whatever needed to be done. When I hung up, the silence felt different. Not empty this time. Clean. Like the sound of air after a storm. By noon, another message arrived from Dad. The subject line read, "We need to talk." I didn't open it. Instead, I clicked forward and sent it to Maya. She would filter everything now. I was done being the bridge between chaos and reason. Later in the day, I received one final call. It was my aunt again. She said the family was divided, that some were defending Dad, others condemning Elaine. She asked if I wanted to explain my side on a group call. I said no. The truth didn't need a stage. After we hung up, I sat in my chair, looking at the folder labeled Family on my desktop. The files sat neatly stacked like a record of all the lines I had drawn. I opened the transcript of the voice memo and read it one more time. The words had lost their power to sting. They were just sentences now, flat and meaningless. The damage had already turned into distance. That night, I went to bed early. The snow outside had stopped, and the street lamps cast soft halos on the sidewalk. I left the window slightly open so the cold air could move through the room. It smelled faintly of winter and something new, maybe freedom. I dreamed that I was back in my mom's kitchen. She was there, humming, her hands dusted with flour. She looked at me and smiled the way she used to when she wanted me to know she understood without words. When I woke up, the room was filled with pale morning light. My chest felt lighter. The phone sat silent on the nightstand. No new messages, no missed calls. For the first time in a long time, I didn't check it right away. I just lay there breathing, feeling the kind of quiet that finally belonged to me. A year passes quietly when you finally stop waiting for an apology. The first snow of December fell the same way it did last year, soft and soundless, but everything inside me was different. I had moved to a smaller place near the river, a space that smelled of cedar and coffee. The walls were pale and clean, untouched by the echoes of old conversations. I spent that morning unpacking the last of my boxes, the ones labeled winter and keepsakes. When I lifted the lid, the first thing I saw was the ornament with my mom's name written in gold. Paint. My hands trembled a little as I hung it on the small tree I had bought for myself. It leaned slightly to the right, imperfect but alive. The quiet in my new home wasn't the kind that pressed against you. It breathed with me. I brewed tea, opened the window a crack, and let the cold air slip in. Across the street, an older couple strung lights on their porch, their laughter carrying faintly through the wind. I stood there watching them until my kettle whistled. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like an outsider looking into someone else's joy. I felt content, maybe even free. When I sat at my desk to check the mail, I noticed one envelope tucked beneath a stack of flyers. It was handwritten, my name in my dad's uneven cursive. The sight of it made my chest tighten, that old mix of dread and longing. I carried it to the kitchen, set it beside my mug, and just looked at it for a while. The return address was the same as always. The house I once called home. I told myself I didn't need to open it, but curiosity has a pull stronger than peace. I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. His handwriting wavered like he'd written it in a hurry. He started with an apology. He said he was sorry for how things turned out, sorry for the hurt, sorry for not protecting me better. My eyes moved over the words, slowly measuring each one. It sounded sincere at first, almost gentle. Then near the bottom, the tone shifted. He wrote that Elaine hoped I'd reconsider signing the transfer after all, that it would simplify things for everyone, that we could finally move on. I felt the heat rise in my chest. The words blurred, and for a moment I thought I might laugh. It wasn't an apology. It was a negotiation disguised as one. I folded the paper carefully, placed it back into the envelope, and stared at it for a long time. Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the window. I walked to the fireplace and held the letter over the flame. The paper curled instantly, the ink melting into dark lines before turning to ash. The smell was sharp, almost sweet. Watching it burn felt cleaner than any conversation we could ever have. Some people never say sorry. They bargain with their guilt instead. That evening, I went for a walk along the river. The water moved slowly, catching the reflections of Christmas lights from nearby houses. My breath made small clouds in the air. I passed families carrying boxes of decorations, kids laughing, couples holding hands. I used to think those scenes belonged to a world that had closed its doors to me. Now I understand they were just ordinary moments, the kind you rebuild when you stop chasing the ones who break them. When I came home, I called Maya. She had become more than just my lawyer over the months. She was the voice of reason when emotions blurred my edges. She asked how I was holding up. I told her about the letter, about the apology that wasn't one. She sighed softly on the other end, said she'd add it to the file just in case. Then her voice softened. "Claire," she said, "they'll keep trying because manipulation doesn't retire. But you don't have to answer the door anymore." I thanked her. After we hung up, I stood by the window again, watching the city lights tremble in the river's reflection. I thought of my mom. I could almost hear her humming that old Christmas tune, the one she sang while we baked cookies. I whispered the line she always said when life got heavy. "Kindness isn't letting people walk over you." I smiled at the memory. Later that night, I pulled out a small journal I had started keeping after therapy. I wrote about the house, the silence, the letter, and the fire. I wrote that forgiveness was no longer my goal. Peace was. I ended the entry with a line that came naturally, as if it had been waiting to be written. Some stories don't need revenge. They just need closure strong enough to keep the door shut. Before bed, I lit one candle on the table, the same scent my mom used to love, cinnamon and clove. The flame flickered gently, lighting the ornament on my little tree. I whispered goodnight to her photo and turned off the lamp. As I settled under the blanket, I thought about the message my dad had sent me a year ago, the one that had started it all, the voice memo. I hadn't listened to it since that night, but now in the dark I remembered every word. "She'll sign it if we make it sound like family on Christmas." That line no longer hurts. It felt distant, like a sentence from someone else's story. The world outside had gone still. A single car passed, its headlights brushing across the walls before fading away. The clock ticked softly, steady and calm. My heart matched its rhythm. I closed my eyes and pictured the house again, not as a place I'd lost, but as something I had finally left behind. The kind of leaving that doesn't need an audience, just a quiet certainty that it's over. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains, turning the room gold. I brewed coffee, fed the cat I'd adopted last spring, and opened the window to let in the smell of snow. The river sparkled in the distance, and for the first time in years, Christmas didn't feel like a threat. It just felt like a day. I took my mug to the living room and sat by the tree. The ornament with Mom's name caught the light perfectly. I traced the letters with my fingertips, smiling. Somewhere out there, my dad might still be telling himself a version of the story that made sense to him. That was fine. The truth no longer needed his approval. I leaned back on the couch, closing my eyes, letting the warmth of the morning sink in. The world had moved on quietly, and so had I. The sound of the kettle in the kitchen began to whistle softly, and I didn't rush to turn it off. The story started to breathe on its own the night I finally posted it. I had been rewriting the opening line for hours, staring at the empty page like it might talk back. The cursor blinked in a quiet rhythm, waiting. I wrote the title and let it sit there. I got a voice memo from my dad meant for my stepmom. What I heard made me cancel my invitation to Christmas dinner. It sounded almost too simple for everything it carried. But truth never needed decoration. I read it one last time, took a deep breath, and clicked submit. The story went live on Reddit under the thread pro-revenge. For a while, nothing happened. I made tea, fed the cat, folded laundry I didn't really need to fold. When I came back to the computer, the screen was filled with notifications, comments stacking one after another. The post had hit the top of the feed. People were reading, reacting, debating, feeling. Strangers who didn't know me were piecing together my life through paragraphs and pain. One of the first comments said that it didn't sound like revenge at all, that it sounded like freedom. Another wrote that sometimes walking away is louder than shouting. A woman my mother's age commented that she wished she had done the same thing 30 years ago. I sat there in the soft light of my living room, watching the thread grow, the words multiplying like small lanterns in the dark. It felt strange at first, seeing my life turned into a story. But then something shifted. It wasn't just my story anymore. It belonged to anyone who had ever swallowed betrayal to keep the peace. To anyone who had chosen silence because fighting felt like losing. The responses became the chorus, hundreds of voices echoing back the same truth. Peace is the revenge you never have to explain. Hours passed without me noticing. The room grew darker, only the glow of the screen kept time. The top comment caught my eye. It said that wasn't revenge. That was justice with boundaries. I read it 3 times. My chest tightened, not with sadness, but recognition. It was exactly what I had wanted someone to understand. I closed the laptop for a moment and walked to the window. The night outside was quiet, the river below catching reflections of streetlights. I thought of my mom. Of her laugh, her patience, her quiet strength. She would have loved that line. Justice with boundaries, it sounded like her. The next morning, I woke to hundreds of new messages. Some were thank you notes from strangers who said the story gave them courage. Others shared their own experiences. Women who had stood up to families, partners' bosses. One woman wrote that she had finally decided not to invite her toxic brother to Christmas. I smiled reading that. The story had started as closure for me, but it had become something else. A mirror for people finding their own boundaries. Later that day, Maya called. She had seen the post too. Her voice held both amusement and pride. "You went viral," she said. I told her I hadn't expected it to spread that fast. She said people recognize the truth when they see it, even when it hurts. She paused, then asked if I was ready to close the legal file for good. I said yes, it was time. When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. The air felt light. I looked around my apartment, the plants by the window thriving, the cat curled on this couch, the small tree still standing from Christmas. Life had rearranged itself without me noticing. I made a second post that afternoon, a small update thanking everyone who had read the story. I wrote that peace isn't about forgetting, it's about choosing what deserves your attention. The comment section filled again, but this time it felt softer. People shared stories about letting go, about protecting their sanity. It felt like community, not noise. As the sun began to set, I brewed coffee and sat by the window. The city glowed in amber and silver. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour. I opened my journal and wrote a single line. Revenge isn't loud. It's the quiet that follows when you stop explaining yourself. The phone buzzed once on the table. It was another email, this time from an unknown address. I hesitated before opening it. The subject line said simply, "For what it's worth." Inside was a single sentence, "I'm sorry." No signature, no name, just that. I stared at it for a while. It could have been Dad, maybe Elaine, maybe no one at all. It didn't matter. I deleted it without saving it. When night came, I turned off all the lights except the small lamp by the couch. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon from the candle I had burned earlier. I picked up the framed photo of my mom. Her smile captured mid-laugh, her eyes steady and warm. I told her quietly that it was finally over. The fight, the noise, the wait. She didn't answer, of course, but the silence that followed felt full, not empty. I lay down on the couch, wrapping myself in the old quilt she made years ago. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender. I closed my eyes, listening to the rhythm of the city outside. Cars whined the distant hum of life carrying on. Before drifting to sleep, I thought about what I had learned through all of it. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors you learn to lock for peace. The family is not owed blind loyalty. It is earned through honesty, and love without respect is just guilt-wearing perfume. The next morning, light poured through the window, clean and golden. I made coffee, opened the window wider, and let the air fill the room. My phone buzzed again with more notifications from Reddit. I didn't rush to check them. I already knew what I needed to know. Peace had finally taken up residence where chaos used to live. I didn't need anyone else's permission to keep it. If you've ever drawn a line that cost you people but gave you back your peace, I want to hear about it. Tell me your story in the comments. And if you believe that silence can be the sharpest form of revenge, like and subscribe for the next story. Sometimes justice is quiet, but it still echoes where it needs to be heard.